There are a group of texts that an individual comes across beyond the pale of enlightenment, and some say just on the cusp of enlightenment. And these are known as the Nididhyasana texts. Now, one of the greatest Nididhyasana texts known to man is the Ashtavakra Gita. Now, the Ashtavakra Gita is a fantastic text, and some say usually the spiritual practitioner will only come across this text after enlightenment, or, as I said, on the cusp of enlightenment. And I've made many videos on the Ashtavakra Gita before, exploring many verses, and today we'll do the same thing. And we'll dive deep into this verse of the Ashtavakra Gita. Devoid of the feeling of I and mine, knowing for certain that nothing is, and with all his inner desires set at rest, the man of knowledge does not act, though he may be acting. This verse gets into the paradox of action on the spiritual path. Who is the doer of actions and the thinker of thoughts? Now, this has been explored within a lot of the Hindu scriptures. Even if we look at the Bhagavad Gita, which is part of the Prasthana Trihi, including the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita, you see a famous verse within the Gita where Arjuna and Krishna are in dialogue, and Krishna explains to him how he should not be attached to the fruits of his own actions. And in Sanskrit, this is called nishkarma karma. Krishna is saying that to Arjuna because Arjuna has a lot of doubt, because in the great Kurukshetra war in the Bhagavad Gita, he is going to be opposed by his cousins and other family members and friends. And so there is a lot of doubt arising in him. And Krishna is trying to get him to get out of this sort of egoic mindset where one overthinks their place in the world and the action that they need to do. Now, that's an extreme example in the Gita, but it is extreme for the purpose to get our mind around how we need to dissolve our ego or downregulate our ego so we can move efficaciously through the world without meeting resistance and conflict, and also causing harm on others and also causing harm on ourselves. So we really need to understand action itself. Now, when we ordinarily think of action, it presupposes an ego or a person who acts in the world according to one's own conditioning and their own personal agenda of how they think the world should be. So this sense of doer is a big problem. We should all know this, but because we don't dive deeper into spirituality and the great texts, and even looking within our own selves and exposing our own conditioning and our own agendas that we have for the world, that's the reason why we have all of the trouble in the world today. And in some sense, it all begins with you. Now, that's not being poetic. It actually does begin with you, because if the work doesn't start with you and you're expecting it to start with somebody else, good luck with that. We've tried that for thousands and thousands of years and it has not worked. So the Ashtavakra Gita is trying to get our mind around that. It's about how do we purify our actions? How do we refine our actions so there is no sense of doer? Now, in the verse, it says that the man of knowledge does not act even though he may be acting like everyone else. Now, this is a real fine subtlety in understanding. Now, if someone read this without any sort of spiritual understanding or spiritual training or understanding of philosophy, it wouldn't mean anything and it would be very difficult to understand. But the person of knowledge, and man is referring to person here, both men and women, is that the person of knowledge has done the spiritual work to downregulate their sense of persona, their jiva, so that they reside in the Atman, the undifferentiated state of consciousness, which is identical with Brahman, the ultimate reality of existence. So from that place, because they operate from the Atman, they are karma free. Because karma is wound up in the jiva. So this is an understanding of rebirth and what comes back life after life. It is the jiva that comes back life after life, and how the jiva is made up is based on the karma, the actions and unconscious actions, the vasanas, the habits and latent tendencies, and the samskaras, the mental impressions and subliminal imprints. Now, all three of those make up this wheel of samsara framework, and That's what builds the jiva. But a person of knowledge, now when we say knowledge here, a person who is a knower of Brahman, who resides in the Atman, they do not operate from the jiva. So they do not operate from their sense of person, which continues to accumulate karma. And then it continues to then reinforce their vasanas and then stores more samskaras, which then becomes future karma and future vasanas. So when we as a jiva go through our life, we have our own beliefs, we have our own conditioning, we have the socialization process that we've endured, and we begin to operate from that place, from that conditioned perspective. And then we go through life and we meet resistance, we come into conflict, there are things that we like, there are things that we dislike, and we continue to create more karma, and we continue to act in the world through our conditioning. And so then we will continue to suffer, right? Because we are acting in the world based on our conditioning, hoping that the events of life will go our way. And ordinarily they do not. Sometimes, right? But it's really a 50-50 a lot of the time. And so our actions create these binding effects. And then this entails new and fresh bondages that we become wrapped up in. And so then we become even more entangled in life when we live life through that jiva and we live life according to our own conditioning. But the person of knowledge, the knower of Brahman, doesn't have any of this bondage because they don't operate through the jiva. And so their actions are purified. And because they don't operate from the jiva, they do what is necessary with a mind of no deliberation. This is what Krishna was trying to get Arjuna to do within the war in the Bhagavad Gita, was trying to get him just to act without thinking about what he thinks is necessary and just act with what is necessary. So you don't then have a conditioning or an agenda that's influencing your actions. And so if we can abide in the Atman, then we can act efficaciously, we can act spontaneously, and we can act with a mind of no deliberation with what is necessary in that moment. Now this aligns with the Taoist Wu Wei when we look at it from intelligent spontaneity. So we are just acting with what is necessary in life at that very point in time, and we're not overthinking the situation. And that's part of the problem in the world. We constantly overthink the situation according to our jiva because we want favorable outcomes. We're not willing to have unfavorable outcomes. We're not willing to go through a little bit of pain because we build our life based primarily on pleasure, and this is a big part of the problem. So the knower of Brahman doesn't have pleasures or pain. They don't have likes or dislikes. So they are free then to move through life without any boundaries. And they can just move through life without having to overthink the situations that they are in. And they just act with what is necessary. And this aligns with that there is only Shiva's will. When we look at it from the Shaiva perspective, there is only Shiva's will. There is only this one will moving through everyone, even though we have this subjective experience. We have this sense of free will. But when we look at it from that perspective, when we look at it from that there's only the Atman, there only ever was the Atman, the undifferentiated state of consciousness, which connects us all as one, then what is doing that is all that is happening. And what is doing that is Brahman. It's not the jiva. We have a view that, yes, it is our subjective view of the world, and it is to a degree, but it is the ego that claims that experience, and the ego does not exist. That's one of the core tenets of this text. It does not exist. It's an illusion. It's a program that has been embedded in all of our minds that builds this layer of maya, illusion, of measurement, of measuring reality into this and that, which eclipses the true nature of reality, which is Brahman. And the true nature of Brahman is oneness. And so when we understand that and we continue to down-regulate our sense of I, then we begin to understand that there is only Shiva's will. The idea that it was our will is a misperception and a misunderstanding of how reality truly is. And so that's what this verse is primarily about. It's about getting out of that sense that you are the one who is the actor in this play, when there is only the one director. Even though you may think there's a host of actors, there's really only one director that is pulling the strings in this divine play, this divine Leela. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.